Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie, and I'm the Director of Community here at Rock Paper Coin. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started as our amazing attendees start to trickle on into the room. Number one, before we get started today, please head over to the chat, and I want you to change your settings to everyone instead of just to the host and the panelist, so that we can all see your comments as you're starting to communicate with us. Number two, community is really big to us. So I want you to say hello in the chat, tell everyone who you are, where you're coming from, and what you do. And please don't forget to drop your IG handle so everyone can follow each other and make new connections. And speaking of getting to know you, I also want you to take the second to take out your phones and be sure to follow us on Instagram at Rock Paper Coin. And then please also follow our amazing guest, Sam. He is such a fantastic resource to follow. Both of those handles are going to be in the chat, so go ahead and do that. And while you're at it, feel free to snap some pics of your screen or of you watching this webinar and tag both of us. I know Sam and I would love to see your behind the scenes of today's session. And lastly, all right, so for those new to Rock Paper Coin, we are a fast growing platform that serves small business owners by providing affordable invoices, modern proposals, slick contracts, and so much more, all on one easy platform that your clients love using. So please check us out today if you have not. And with that, I want to go ahead and get this party started. Our guest today really needs no introduction because he is truly everywhere right now. But I'm excited about this topic because I know so many of you are really struggling with this. And Sam is going to help you so much. So first things first, attendees, I want you to drop a hands up emoji, one hand, two hands, whatever hands, or a comment in the chat if you've ever had a client ask if you can do a service for less. Yeah. Comment if you've had to explain your pricing and attempt to justify your service. Yeah. And hands up if you've ever felt you need to prove your experience or sell your overall value. Totally been there. Yeah. Well, you are all in good company today. Just look at the chat. This is a safe place. Clearly, we have all been there. In fact, I wanted to share a comment we received at registration that I felt was so impactful to why this topic is so important. And I'm not going to share the author, but I did want to say to the author, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing this with us. And it said, like everyone else, I am constantly being asked to give a discount on my services. I'm a certified planner and I've been doing events for over 30 years. Unfortunately, my experience means nothing. So again, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And please know that clearly you are not alone. We have got you. You have a whole room, a whole chat that's got you. Second, Sam, my friend, are you ready for this? That statement was
But
so powerful, wasn't it?
yeah, it is. It's true. It's something that everybody runs into, and there are certainly some ways through it that I can help out with.
Yeah, I think a lot of people joining today and even hearing this after are going to relate to a lot of the feelings that are in here. So I want to thank you, my friend, for being here. And before we get into some really deep questions, I wanted you to take a moment and share about how you ended up being such a leader in the sales space and why this education means so much to you.
Well, thanks for having me, Katie. I appreciate it. How I got here, I think like most people, I just kind of stumbled into the wedding industry. On the whole, I was a restaurant manager at the time up in the San Juan Islands at a resort. And the general manager came over one day and said, hey, Sam, guess what? You're the new weddings guy. The other one had to go take care of a family emergency. And so we need somebody to cover the work. And I was like, great, when do I start? And he said, in 2 hours, we have a ceremony that you've got to be at. And that
Wow.
was me way back in 2006. And, I was 27 years old. I'd been to 3 weddings in my entire life and knew nothing about managing an event operation, but I was thrown in like most people in the wedding industry. I did that for 8 years, and then I went and picked up a job as Todd Fiskus's number two at Todd Events for a couple years, running operations for him. So got an experience of floral decor planning and design. And I realized at that point that I wanted to help more than one business owner at a time, and that I seem to have a gift for looking at the business and sales and marketing side of creative companies. And I felt like there were a lot of business owners that needed a wingman to come in and help guide either business strategy, finance, sales, marketing, or operations. And that was the skill set that I had. So I started off doing coaching work, and what I realized uh, is that a lot of people needed more help in sales than I imagined. And it's just not something that you're born with. You have to learn it, and most people don't go to school for it or get jobs in it. And so it's a skill that needs to be developed, but is not. And I remember very specifically one of the days, Katie, at the time, my fiance, and now my wife, she was director of catering at Four Seasons in Dallas. And she came home from work one day, and I was working from home, and I was like, Katie, I know what I want to do with our company, or my company at the time. And she's like, what? I said, I want to become the sales and pricing guy in the wedding industry. And she's like, well, do it. And so I remember I picked up the phone and I called Anya Winnica, who was at the time with the Knot. And I know you all are familiar with her. And she and I chatted, and she said, well, what perfect timing, because I'm looking at an education series and I'd love for you to come out and speak at the workshops this year. So I went out and started speaking publicly on this, and I just became known for it. And I've spent a lot of time investing in my own education through a certificated program and dozens scores of books on pricing and sales psychology, and it's led me to this opportunity to help many people in an area that they're troubled by.
Yeah, okay, so first of all, I think it's always amazing when somebody is quite literally thrown into an industry for like sink or swim, right? And ends up loving it, number one. But then also the fact that you got to dive into and work with such amazing people in the industry, like that experience, people would give anything for. So kudos to you. That's incredible.
Thanks.
But this is amazing. And you just have me so pumped for this. And I want to dive right in with some big questions. Are you ready?
Do it. I'm on the
Roll.
springboard. I'm ready to go.
Ready to roll. So, for so many business owners, talking about money with clients or anyone in general, let's be real. I mean, we're in tax season, and even talking about taxes is uncomfortable for some people. It feels literally uncomfortable for so many people. I think people would rather crawl out of their skin and talk about anything else other than money and pricing. So, why do you think that so many people struggle to talk about money?
I think the biggest reason is because lack of preparedness. When we are not prepared for something, we get nervous or anxious about it, no matter what it is that we're doing. I remember the first time that I went on stage and spoke. I can't believe Anya invited me back for workshop number two. It was awful. It was terrible. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. And then the next one was a little bit better, and the next one was a little bit better, and the next one was a little bit better, and so on. And I've done, I don't even know, probably 50 of these types of interviews over the last several years, and as many speaking engagements on stage. And now I'm totally comfortable doing it. And I think that one of the challenges that business owners run into, especially in a sales oriented situation, is that there's not a lot of practice that you get before you actually have to show up and it means something. And, any kind of athlete will tell you that you don't show up to race day or game day without having practiced. But I think in many ways, that's what wedding business owners are attempting to do, is to show up on a discovery call, or to create a pitch, or to try and convert and overcome an objection that oftentimes has to do with money, when it means something like a 3, 13, $30,000 sale. And so there's the lack of preparedness, the not having practiced very often, and then the immense amount of pressure on the success of that particular conversation that just makes it scary to do.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I think there's another part of it too, and I will fully admit, I suffer from imposter syndrome pretty bad. And I know a lot of people in our industry do as well, because naturally, as creatives, that's just something that, we kind of inherit. So I think there might be a little bit of this in play, but I'm curious about your deeper thoughts there. So many pros, if you think about it, they have incredible portfolios and have worked hard to build their businesses. Why do you think people are so resistant talking about their value and their worth when they have clearly put in the time and earned the right, dare we say, to maybe brag a little?
Hmm. I think it's hard for people to talk about themselves in that kind of way. I think in general, most people are more humble than they are narcissistic.
Yeah.
I mean, narcissism is a scale, right? I mean, confidence is pretty close to narcissism,
Sure.
and so I think a lot of people tend to lack confidence again in something that um, uh, that is hard to talk about. I think the thing about the not knowing your worth though, or not being able to articulate it, is probably more what I see than afraid to or not wanting to do it. It's the not knowing how to express it. Because, like, let's take for instance what you said and what the about experience and what the author of the comment had shared that you spoke about earlier.
Mhm.
The idea of somebody being in business or having done something for 30 years is a statement about that individual. However, the value is derived in the benefit that the buyer receives. And so if we are talking about what it is that we have as a credential, but not turning it into what kind of value that offers as a benefit to the buyer, then it's hard to connect what it is that we do with what it is that they get. And that's where the value proposition is made. And when I say value, just mean that's just another way of saying, like, able to justify your price. So I think the challenge that a lot of people have is not necessarily talking about money, but knowing how to articulate the worth that they have to express it in terms that somebody is going to understand, respect, and want more of.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. 3 questions in, and you're already blowing my mind, Sam. So let's keep going. So we know pros at this point, right? Everything that we're talking about, we know that pros are undervaluing and under explaining, right? That's just like something that we know across the board is happening. But I'll admit, sometimes I also see confident pros almost over explaining their process or their experience. And I think so many people think they're helping the process by really explaining everything, like deep conversations. But in reality, um, to me, it feels like they are sometimes talking clients out of booking.
Mm.
Is it possible that perhaps by working so hard to justify something, it naturally creates an environment of doubt? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yes. So there's, this wouldn't be a technical term, but when you look thirsty, people wonder why.
Yeah.
And, desperation does not breed confidence. And oftentimes, when you feel like you have to sell harder to persuade somebody to buy something, it comes across as being salesy and therefore desperate. Or it could just be overbearing and somebody doesn't want to buy from somebody who's putting pressure on them. There's something called psychological reactance, where you feel like you're being cornered by somebody. One of my favorite examples of this is, for instance, when you're on what I would call a discovery call, what some people call a sales call or a consultation, and you're like, "Hey, thanks so much, dear potential client, for talking with me for 8 minutes to warm it up. And now I'm going to move into my pitch. Can I share my screen with you and walk you through my packages and my pricing?" Like, that is the killer for a discovery call and a sales process. There is a wall that goes up. A psychological wall that goes up to defend and protect oneself from the conversation that follows that point. And so, yeah, when you put too much pressure on somebody, they tend to either fight back or they just run away, or they'll just tune out until they can cancel the Zoom session and then take off. So
Yeah.
I do think that there's some salesmanship, or some salesy salesmanship that occurs there. I think that there can be some desperation that breeds a lack of confidence. And I think that what actually truly builds more value than anything else is asking a great question and listening to the person who's sharing the response, and then asking another great question as a follow-up or clarifying question to that, and then listening to that. When I mean, I'll do my fair share of talking, but That's why you brought me in today, was to talk. But if I'm selling, I'm listening. And I'm listening probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the time. And the only things that I'm really talking about are questions, stories, or empathic statements to let them know that I'm there with them, being vulnerable as well. So it's really less about selling and more about listening if you want to create that kind of worth that you're looking to charge.
Yeah, I always tell people, remember why you bought something. Like, we can all remember stories about buying something and it just felt like a great purchase. And
Mhm.
chances are it had very little to do with the product. Like, I mean, you can be enthusiastic about a product. However, it was likely the connection that was made while you were purchasing that product or service or whatever it is. And it's the first thing that goes out of someone's memory when they seem to also be selling something is think back to a time that you bought something and it really made you feel good to buy that. Why? Why did that make you feel good? And then try to replicate that. I always try to remind people about that. It's like we have lessons in everything that we do. So like go to the vault and figure out,
Yeah.
how you felt in a certain way in the past.
You,
Um,
you know, what's interesting about that, here's a subtlety and a nuance that I find that certain people can reach when they get to, sales ability that, can fill the calendar with regularity. If they really want to increase the value of what it is that they're doing, to charge more, is that you can sell differently than you personally like to buy. What I find is that people tend to project their ideal client from themselves based on how they like to buy and what they want and what they need. And so, like you said, you want to connect, for instance. So I would classify that as a relator buyer type. So if I'm selling to you, for instance, to build up value to then charge more and to feel comfortable with, the sale, I would want to focus on connection. If I was talking with an analyzer buyer type, somebody that I would call an analyzer buyer type, we would focus actually on the quality of the product, because that is what they want to know about. They want to have zero defects. The boss type buyer is looking for a good outcome. So I would talk about what this gets them at the end of the day and the result that they're looking for. And then if it was a dreamer, I would collaborate and come up with ideas and possibilities and opportunities that could happen if they bought my product or service. So I'm really selling something totally different, and the value that's derived is different based on what the ideal or what that particular client is looking for. So there's lots of different ways to approach sales. I think the best salespeople are the ones that can stretch their natural instinctive selling style and meet the buyer where they're at, and that's when the magic happens. That's when sparks fly.
Yeah, okay. The comment section is so quiet because I feel like everyone is like taking notes. Don't forget, everyone, we're going to send you a replay on this. So you'll get to watch this and listen to this over and over again, but these are great. So I think that you can agree with me that 2025 has already been a weird booking year for a lot of people, right? We are hearing that bookings are down. Meanwhile, bookings for 2026 are up, which makes for a very strange dynamic, I think. So we're seeing a trend in businesses that keep lowering their prices to
Mhm.
get last second bookings to fill up their 2025 calendar. And I think it comes down to that fear of saying no to money that we know a lot of people have. So what's your take on this, and how can pros break free from feeling pressured to lower their rates or take any inquiry that comes their way, especially in vulnerable seasons?
Mm. Boy, we could talk for the remaining 41
Yeah.
minutes about this. I think here's what I would say. Pressure typically comes because of time constraint. And that begs the question of, like, why are you in this position in the first place? Why are you so empty that you are feeling desperate and therefore willing or interested in slashing your rates to be able to fill the calendar? So the first thing I would say is focus on preventing that from happening by building your calendar earlier rather than waiting until the last minute. What I find specifically in the last 18 months is that a lot of people had held on to an ideal client with a super high price tag in mind, coming out of the 21, 22 boom. And that meant that because they were holding out for only ideal clients, or maybe they were too busy to get back to all the inquiries, and so they just kind of took shortcuts in the sales process, or maybe they kept their rates really high at the premium price that could have been charged in 21 and 22 and didn't adjust soon enough. And so because we all tend to work in silos and we aren't, always openly talking about what you're doing with your own pricing strategy. I think that a lot of people wait until too long to adapt their pricing strategy. Now, I've always been a big believer in dynamic pricing, meaning that your work is not worth what you put a price tag on, but it's worth what the market will pay for it. And that market rate goes up and down. You could look at art, for instance, and you could see that companies like Sotheby's and Berkshire Hathaway, Christie's, other big auction houses, they're actually laying off employees because they can't get enough art to go through at the prices that people are wanting to pay or to charge for the art that they have. So they're just holding off on selling the art because the market won't pay that price. And so if we look at that as a model and we go through and think about our art that we have in a creative community like the wedding space, you don't really have the opportunity to not sell something and hold on to it until later. Maybe you're independently wealthy and you do, but most of us actually have to get the work sold. So I do feel like that there's some opportunity to modify pricing, not cut it drastically, but modify it based on where the market will pay at that particular point in time. I would dovetail that with what I had talked about at the beginning of this response, in that I would start off with a reasonable price that you think that the market will pay, 9, 12, 15 months before that particular date, so that you can start to fill in some of those calendar dates. Once you build up a more robust booking calendar, that allows you then the comfort and the safety and the security net of being able to start to increasing your prices to where you ultimately want to take them. But I think that one of the big mistakes that I see a lot of people make is that they set their prices based on how much money they want to make and
Mhm.
how many events they want to do. And they just use simple arithmetic to go, okay, I'm going to charge this much. They charge that much, but nobody pays that much. And then months and months and months and months and months go by. And they're like, crap, now I have to lower my prices. But they were never actual prices. They were just price tags that you put on there. They're not what people were paying. So I would say find a good price that people were paying and then continue to charge that, incrementally increase your prices. And if that doesn't work, then something else is going on besides your price. And you should address that rather than the price.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's solid. That's great. So shifting gears a little, talk to me about the modern day price shoppers. The booking game has changed a lot, right? Year over year. And that's just going to continue to that's going to continue to happen. Especially in the changes in how people find and hire pros. That's also changing every single year. So for me, the truth is that people will always find someone cheaper if that's what they are prioritizing, right? But in your opinion, why is competing on price a losing game overall for pros? And what would you rather see them doing instead?
Well, going to the beginning part of your question about like price shoppers. So my understanding in all the research and education that I've received through, formal programs like the Applied Behavioral Economics program that I just wrapped up, or, reading in books on buyer psychology, or just my practice with the, hundreds of clients that I work with every year, is that you're going to see couples who are new to buying this, and there are no price tags associated with what they see. So, imagine you were looking at going on a trip somewhere and you had never been there, and neither had anybody really around you, or at least they weren't talking about it. And you're like, yeah, it looks beautiful on Instagram, but how much does it actually cost to get there? Like, is this
Mhm.
something that I can afford?
Yeah.
So, I say that so that everybody who's listening has a little empathy for what it is that couples are going through. They're doing what you would do if you had never bought this big thing that cost, 50 to $150,000 for many people that are paying, for a full wedding or a wedding weekend. And there's a lot of pressure and expectation and multiple people involved. And you're sharing the cost with somebody that you have not really bought something this big with in the past, your fiance. There may be other family members who are involved. There's a lot of complexity to this. And so there's a couple of different terms that are important to keep in mind when it comes to price. That one is absolute value and the other is relative value. So with what we do in the wedding industry, there's no absolute value to what something should cost or why it costs this much. There's a photographer who will do work for 1,500 or 5,000 or 50,000. At the end of the day, they get photos, right? But there's so much more value imbued in what that 50,000 versus the 1,500 gets you. So it's really a game of relative value. And what couples are doing when they're price shopping is they are trying to compare the value that is perceived in the quality and the brand cachet of that particular provider versus this one versus this one versus this one. So what price shoppers are doing is something very smart. They're going out and collecting multiple data points and then associating the quality that they see with the price that is being reflected. And that's normal. We should expect that. Don't fight that. Don't hate that at all. That's just what we humans do.
Mhm.
So knowing that, I don't, I see it as instead of pushing back on it or getting annoyed by it, I'm like, embrace it. Become the person that puts out so much great information that helps people understand what they're getting, why it's of value to them, why your product is different or better than other people, and really putting the focus on the reframe, which is, hey, this is the price tag. And yes, that's important. But at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. Lower prices, lower quality, higher prices, higher quality on average. So unless you really want low quality, we're going to have to look at something that's in the middle. So let me talk to you about how to determine what high quality looks like. So take control of the conversation by shifting it away from pricing and putting it on the product and the experience and what it is that they're ultimately going to get from it rather than how much it costs to get that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the director of community, right? So I'm a big advocate for focusing your efforts on communicating why you are the right choice. And for me, it just comes down to no one has your story or does anything like you do. That's your selling power, right? You bring something so unique and so special to the table that no one else can duplicate. Someone who's inquiring about you is going to pick up on that, and they're going to pick up on that authenticity and the joy that you have and the experience. It's just going to start automatically and genuinely coming out, because of what you are bringing to the table. And they can't do that if you're just copying and matching what the pro right next to you is doing, or if you're just trying to be the cheapest option out there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I like competitive price. I mean, there are different pricing strategies. There's like 100 of them, but
Yeah.
dynamic pricing is one. Penetration pricing is another. I'm not against penetration pricing when you're new to a market. There's competitive pricing, and then there's premium pricing, and those are kind of the general strategies that I typically see. Premium pricing is I'm going to charge more than the market, and I'm going to hold out and only book based on that. And I'm going to use exclusivity and a velvet rope approach. Penetration pricing is intentionally undercutting the competitive rates that others are charging so that you gain brand awareness and then you build up your audience and then you get more referrals and then you slowly and steadily increase your prices. The competitive pricing is something that I think everybody, I'd say 80% of the people who are in the wedding industry are engaged in. And so I'm not against looking at what your competitors are doing and
Yeah.
matching that price or even coming in a little bit under but providing exceptional value compared to it. I think it's important to recognize like what they're charging and what they're charging and what they're charging and what they're charging so that you aren't an anomaly for the buyer. But I wouldn't intentionally go in for a long-term strategy and recommend undercutting people. Again, I just keep going back to price is a reflection of the value that you have provided. And if you cannot justify a higher price with your value proposition, get better at communicating your value. We don't, if you want to lower your price, that like, let's say this is your value, your skill at articulating your value, and this is the price that you're charging. Whenever they're equal, it's a good thing. But if you're charging more than the value you can articulate, then you can do two things. You can either lower your price.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do that. Or you can increase your ability to communicate your value. And so a lot of people take the easy route by just dropping their price. What
Yeah.
you need to do is you need to increase your ability to articulate your value. And that could be done in many ways. That's why people call somebody like me, is because my first piece of advice is almost always never lower your price. It's get better at this. And
Right. Don't hit the panic button. Like before
that's
you hit
right.
the panic button, because once you hit that panic button, it's very hard to put that back in the box.
Yeah, well, yeah, it can be. I mean, one of the nice things about the wedding industry is that we don't have our prices typically on display. So it's not like somebody, used to buy it and at one price and then it went down at another. Yeah, people talk every once in a while, but I don't think people are like, "Oh my gosh, I loved your photographs." Or like, "Oh yeah, that was great, and I only paid 79.50 for it." Like, I don't think that people are talking about it that much. But I think internally for your own mindset, I think it's important to just to kind of switch the perspective that whenever you think like, oh no, I'm not booking, I should lower my prices, it should be, oh no, I'm not booking, I should increase my sales skills. I should increase the demand on my business. I should get better at articulating my value proposition. I should know and be able to explain more clearly why I'm different and why that's better and how that helps clients in ways that others who seemingly provide the same thing as me do but don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And in sticking to a similar, you know, thing that we're in, communication, I want to kind of segue a little bit into trust.
Mhm.
And I have a theory. So I know we could easily talk about this for hours, but I have a theory. When pros start breaking down why things cost so much, and you kind of alluded this earlier, I feel like it triggers a part of the customer's brain that says maybe I should or I could negotiate at this point. And I think negotiating and that conversation is such a trigger for a lot of people that are listening to this right now. So, number one, would you agree that we
Mm.
need to shift the focus away from cost? And as you just said, we need to obviously shift it towards value. And if so, I want you to tell me, like I'm five, how in the world would I actually do this?
Yeah. Well, I do agree with you that it does it switches somebody from what we might call an emotional way of thinking to a logical way of thinking. A technical term would be a system one versus system two, this non-conscious versus conscious way of thinking. And the non-conscious way of thinking, 98% of our decisions are made that way. And most purchase decisions, or at least most of the buyer's journey to make the purchase, is done non-consciously, emotionally, without thinking. It's the 2%, that deliberate, slow, rational thinking that a lot of people hit a wall on. And when you get in the weeds on that, people they overanalyze, and then they end up in analysis paralysis and decide to make no choice rather than to make the smart choice or the best choice for them at that moment. So, even terms like investment, like, check out my investment guide. Like that word investment triggers, math, I should be logical rather than emotional and making decisions without thinking so much about them. So my advice is not to use the word investment anywhere in anything that you do unless you are a financial advisor and you are really looking at that. Or if you're looking at a business investment, like we use the term investment because, for instance, getting a new website with us is an investment in your business because you will get a return on it, a tangible financial return on it. So I would stay away from really getting into the weeds on how much things cost. I think there's this misconception that when we hear over the last couple of years about how couples want transparency, they want transparency, but it's not necessarily transparency only in pricing.
Mhm.
And it's more transparency in how do things work and what do I need to know about this vendor category or about how this interconnects and relates with the other things. And it really what we're asking for is, can you share information with me? Couples crave information. Unfortunately, there's this other misconception that less is more on your website. And so couples who are used to shopping online are running into wedding professionals that are only showing pretty pictures in their bio and then a contact form and asking them to take the risk and make the next step. And so I do think that there's a real issue when it comes to that kind of information being available. So, how do you then talk about why you cost so much? I think the simplest way is to let them know that, typically lower prices are associated with lower quality, higher prices with higher quality. And at some point, as somebody who's planning your wedding, dear couple, you need to ask yourself, what is most important to you? Is it saving money, or is it getting a really great celebration that you can look back on for years to come, knowing that you did all the things you could to create this moment in time that was amazing to experience and amazing to remember. And if you're really focused on the money, I'm not the person for that. And frankly, like that's not the number one driver for what I do. What is delivering that great experience that you're looking for, both at the wedding and before the wedding, or post production if you're in photo video. So I would shift the focus. Again, it's the reframe. Don't try and get better at explaining why something costs so much. Shift the conversation from cost to gain. What do they get by working with you? And talk about those things so that when they're making the decision, that's what they're thinking about rather than how much something costs.
I could not agree more. Let's figure out how to put that on a bumper sticker. At the end of the day, I want, please, everyone here, leave here with this and truly believe it in everything that you do. Clients aren't just buying a service. They're buying peace of mind. They're buying trust. They're buying confidence, period. They are picking you because they like you. They're excited to work with you, and they believe that you can make them happy doing what you do, right? And if they didn't, they have other choices to go and work with. So exactly what you just said, like they're there for a reason. Simple as that, right? So
Yeah.
have pride and have confidence in that and prove them right, that they're in the right spot for a reason.
That's right. I think if you just go through and just say, you're right, you know what, friend, I am not the cheapest. And
Right.
and for good reason, because cheap is typically low quality. I'm maybe not the best, but I'm better than most. And so I charge not the highest, but I charge higher than most, and I'm okay with that. There's this approach I remember reading about in how to pitch VCs, venture capitalists, and everybody goes in there with like, I'm going to sell you, like you were talking about earlier in the conversation, like I'm going to go in and I'm going to try and persuade you. But here's the thing: somebody who feels like they're being sold is constantly looking to poke holes in things. And so
Yeah.
what you can do is you can deflate all of that energy by simply going, let me tell you about why it is that you should not buy me. And so if you can, go through and say, X, Y, and Z, then they stop looking for problems. It's called the negativity effect, where they're looking for the negative aspects of something. And instead they start opening their ears to the things that you're actually saying. So diffuse it right away and then shift the conversation. Just flat out say, you know what? I got to tell you, like wedding photography, ridiculously expensive. No joke. And there's a lot of work that goes into it that gets you the great result that you're looking for, a lifetime of memories to look back on. And there's too big of a risk to take your chances on somebody who's just learning how to do it with somebody that they hired on Fiverr to come and hold the second camera for them. So I am a little bit more expensive. I admit it, but I think you're going to see the difference in the result.
Yeah. I love this. And we can talk about this for hours. Like someone's going to have to stop us. Sari, I'm holding you accountable. You're going to have to stop us here. But one more question before we shift gears, because it's the number one question that we get. And I'm sure it's a question that you get all the time too, Sam. Should you list pricing on your website?
Yeah, sure. I'm okay with that. Starting at price. I would not put package details. I wouldn't put range. I wouldn't put average. I would just let them know what the barrier to entry is. You can put it on the bottom of your services page for least impact. You can put it on the top of your contact page for more impact. I would not put it in your contact form. Do not ask somebody what their budget is. That's why they're inquiring with you for the most part. So I would avoid putting it in your contact form and just put it instead at the bottom of your services page or at the top of your contact page. I think that at the end of the day, the most important place to put it is on your inquiry response. So when they inquire, you should, personalize the first paragraph. And then I would, let them know, yes, I'm available. Yes, I can get you pricing. However, I don't know enough about your event for me to give you accurate pricing. My pricing does start at X dollars. If that's a comfortable number for you, I'd love to find some time to hear more about what's important to you, about your wedding, and about the service that I offer. Here are some dates and times that work for me. Which one is best for you? Click to schedule an appointment. So like it just embedding it in there and letting them know this is what it starts at, and this is the next step if that's comfortable for you. One caveat in there for you wedding planners: I would say weddings that I typically work with have a budget that starts at, rather than my services start at. because what they probably know without having a wedding planner is not how much they have to spend on a wedding planner or any vendor, but how much they have overall that they're looking to spend that you would help them manage. So a little bit different for the wedding planner, but the starting out is what I'd recommend.
Love that. You just knocked out like 3 of our Q&A questions at the
Oh,
end. So
good. Okay.
high five to that. Good job. You are just on a roll. And there you have it, folks. The $1,000,000 question answered by the one and only. Okay. But the thing I think, Sam, and I just want to like talk about you for a second, but the thing I think that sets you apart from other educators, and that you are proving here today is that you really love the psychology behind all of this and understanding pricing in general. And that is a big part of who you are, which I appreciate because it's not a simple copy and paste method, right? That we're seeing all over the place. You genuinely want people to understand why things work the way they do, and more importantly, why they don't. And I just want to tell you that I appreciate that so much about you.
Thanks.
Um, so
Well,
I
I mean, look, I've had my own success with my own business, right? Like selling weddings as for venue and a caterer, and doing what I did with Todd events for a couple of years, and then coaching over 1,000 clients one-on-one in the last 8 years. And I think that like that's all great, but again, like go back to what I said in the beginning of the conversation. Like that's a feature. That's about me, and I don't think that most people really care about me. Most people care about what they want and need, and so I do see buyer psychology as an angle in because one, it's effective, but two, I think that it reminds me that it's not just about telling people what I did to get to success or how I charge and why they should do it too, but instead it allows for us to follow some guidelines and best practices that we know to be true, or at least on average more likely to succeed, and then we can tailor what needs to be done based off of that individual business and that buyer. That I will tell you right now, the only person who really knows what you should be charging are the people who are willing to spend the money. If they aren't spending the money, then you're charging more than your value is worth, or at least that you're communicating. And if they're saying yes too often and you have a full calendar before you should, you're not charging enough and you're leaving money on the table, and you should look at a strategy to increase your price. The buyer is the one who tells you how much you should be charging.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And, this kind of goes a little bit into what we were just talking about a second ago, but, something that I'm really curious about is why do some clients immediately question pricing while others seem to like not blink an eye? What is happening in their minds in this moment when that happens?
I think some people are naturally more skeptical. I would look at, like I talked about the 4 different buyer types, and somebody had asked a question in the chat. I put in there. You can learn more about it on my podcast, Own Your Business. You can find that on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. And I talk a lot about buyer types and also how to implement different parts of the buyer's journey with different buyers. So the 4 buyer types that we have are relator, analyzer, boss, and dreamer. And most people who are, a buyer are more than one. They're usually 2, sometimes 3 buyer types. But what we want to do is we want to focus on how can we connect with them and how can we sell differently to them. And once you know how to do that, then you're going to find a lot more success with communicating that.
Amazing. Okay, this is so fascinating. So Sam, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I'm going to take a stand for all of our niche vendors and pros here. But I truly believe, and you may prove me wrong, but I truly believe that some vendors just have a harder time booking at a certain price point than others. So for the sake of this example, let's say a luxury paper good or invitation designer and a luxury cake baker versus more traditionally priced baker and online event options. Okay. These are
Mhm.
not your industry wide vendors like photographers or planners, which I think people are just comfortable paying for. But we've all seen some truly gifted pros in these spaces that deserve to be charging, top end, top dollar. So the question is, for some of these smaller market pros or niches, right? We have a couple photographers in the group here that are specialty photographers even. Where do they even start in explaining and showing their value and price in comparison to traditional market pricing, which they are naturally going to be compared to?
hmm hmm I think it all goes back again to value. So the more you charge, the more value, the more they have to need it. And so the focus is really on need. So when you go through and you think about, how it is that you can drive the price up, whether you're in a specialty segment or you're in a more popular field, it really comes down to why should I pay more for this thing that I could get for a lower price? So like, if you're a luxury paper good provider, you have to answer this one question. Why can't I just email all the people that I want to show up to my wedding? And if you can't answer that with like six different things that make them go, okay, I see your point. Well taken. Like I'm in. Tell me more about how I can get those things from you. If you can't create those problems in the first place, to the level that they need to justify that price, then you're always going to have a hard time. If you are adding in value for the price that you're charging compared to just the manufacturing value of giving them the functional cake to eat or invitation to send out or whatever it is that you might do. Could be chair that you rent or linen that you use. Then there's no reason to justify that gap between functional value and emotional value
Mhm.
that you're trying to create. And so you have to create the emotional value. So I would say focus more on problem finding. I think problem solving is pretty easy. I
Mhm.
have a great product. This solves a problem, but a lot of people gloss over what the problem is for that particular buyer. One of my favorite examples is in the movie Wolf of Wall Street with Martin Scorsese directed. Leonardo DiCaprio's in it. I don't know if have you seen it, Katie?
Oh yeah, love it.
Okay, so there's a scene or like a quarter of the way through the movie where Leonardo DiCaprio is bringing in his guys, and they're going to start up this new, brokerage, and he's like trying to tell them how to sell, and he's like, "Here, sell me this pen." And the guy's like, "Oh, look at this beautiful pen. It feels so good in your hand, and like the blue ink is gorgeous when it writes on the paper, or whatever it was you said." And he's like, "Nah, I'm not buying." He's like, "Here, sell me the pen." Another guy goes through it. He's like, "Nope, I'm not buying." And he goes to his trusted guy and he says, "Sell me this pen." And the guy goes, "Write your name." He's like, "Sold. I want to buy that pen from you." The point is that I think that too many people, like we talked about earlier, are really focused on embellishing what it is that are the features of their product. It's a gluten-free cake, or the flavors are one of a kind, or the ingredients come from local farmers, or I hand make it and spend 4,000 hours doing every one of the cakes, and that's why I charge so much. I think some people care about that, but they kind of expect that it's going to have high quality ingredients. It's going to be custom created. It's going to be taken care of. It's going to be delivered on time, all of those things. The difference is when you go through and you talk about something that they don't yet know that they need, and they're like, "Oh, wow, I had no idea. Now that I know that I need that, I'm willing to pay more for it." So focus on that instead of whatever it is that you think is the feature or the reason from your perspective.
Yeah, love that. Okay, so for anyone who's ever been on a rock, paper, coin webinar before, you know that I am constantly on a mission to make sure that everyone leaves with tangible education. So I'm going to put you in the hot seat for a second here, Sam. And when a client asks any of our attendees, anyone listening to this, can you do it for less? Please teach us. What would you say? I want you to give us a script and guidance on what you want our attendees today to do the second they get those or similar words.
Okay, so this is my gut reaction.
Yes,
Yeah, I could do that, but you wouldn't get the same kind of results that you fell in love with in my portfolio.
love it.
I would say that. And if they wanted more, or if they're like, "Oh, come on," I'd be like, "No, seriously. Like, there's a reason why you like what you see. Is because it takes a certain amount of resources to create. And if you wanted me to charge you less, I would have to then do less. And if I did less, I wouldn't get you the result that you're looking for. And I don't feel comfortable doing that, which is why I would recommend finding somebody else if that is your number one criteria or a non-negotiable for you. And now, like, you're not playing hard to get, but the person is like, "Whoa, hold on, I didn't say I didn't want to work with you." Like, that's usually the response. Like, maybe we can work on the payment terms, or like, could you throw in an extra something? And I'm all for deal sweeteners, In fact, I'm not even against discounting. It's just the last thing that you should do if you really want that piece of business. But there are
Right.
other things that you can do. You can talk about terms and conditions for the deposit schedule or the refund availability. You can talk about deal sweeteners. You can upgrade them to the next level package without increasing the price. There's a few things that you can incorporate before you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'll do it for less, which, I think that everybody should be open to depending on what their calendar looks like.
Yeah, I felt so strongly about asking that question because I feel like every time I go on Facebook and read something in a Facebook group, like that is literally somebody asking for that exact advice. Like, tell me, what would you respond to this? So, thank you, Sam. I want to play devil's advocate for a second and say, would you say it's safe to say
Mhm.
that sometimes when clients ask, "Can you do it for less?" or similar, that they're not always looking for a discount and instead that they're looking for reassurance, they're making a smart decision and don't know how else to ask?
So reassurance is the number one criteria at the end of a complex decision-making process. We know that through, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of studies that have been done that have shown, or tens of thousands of sales transactions that have been monitored, complex sales transactions, that the thing that is most important at the very end of the buyer's journey is risk. Is this going to give me what it is that I want? And so I think you didn't ask that question, but it's less about the response that you give about the money, and it's more about how can we provide more reassurance, or in copywriting, what we call risk reversers. How can we reverse the risk with some form of reassurance? So typically, we're going to look at something like social proof would be the ultimate form of reassurance that we can sprinkle in. So something like a client testimonial or a celebrity testimonial, an as seen in, or an authority saying you have the certificate of expertise, like our friend who had been in business for 30 years, a certified wedding planner. Having something like that would just, like, you don't want to talk about it. You just want to show a little logo or like down at the bottom of a proposal. It could be what's called wisdom of the crowd. I've been doing this for 30 years and I've planned over 300 weddings, or, whatever it is. And here's what I found. Those are all forms of social proof. Reviews, as seen in badges, publications, what list you're on, all of that stuff. Offering case studies towards the end is a really great piece of sales collateral to follow up with in an email. Hey, haven't heard from you in a little while. Want to see how the decision is going. I just got this case study in, or I just thought about this case study that I have. I'd love to share this link that's on my blog. If you have any questions about it, the couple in this case study is more than happy to get an email from anybody that is on the fence. Can I refer you their way? Question mark. Like, that's way more impactful
Yeah.
than I'm going to lower my price to be able to meet you where you want to be. In,
Yeah, yeah.
in fact, if you discount, there is a likelihood that they will take away from that discount offer, if you don't provide a good reason, that you're discounting because you believe that you were overcharging in the first place and your value is not justifying the price, especially if they don't ask for a discount through a counter. If you're just like worried that they've ghosted you and you're like, hey, I'd be willing to offer 10% less for that date if you're interested in signing up by tomorrow. Like that, when you're negotiating against yourself, that is a sure sign to a buyer that you are signaling lack of confidence in the value proposition you're offering, and it will backfire.
Yeah, yeah, that is powerful. That right there, that's the magic sauce. And while you were talking about this, my next question was actually going to be what messaging shifts pros should make today, right now, on their social media, to position themselves as they are. And I feel like a lot of the examples that you just gave are exactly some of the things that they should be going and putting on their social media right now, or at least, updating or making sure are still relevant or clear and new. Is there anything else you would add to that? Like, what do you really want to see on everyone's social media right now?
Well, I mean, now you bring me back in, or bring my business partner Abby Jew in for a conversation about social media. We just started our social media agency, Duet Social Media, about 3 or 4 months ago, and I have so many thoughts on that. But from a sales perspective, related to what we're talking about specifically, recognize that social media is early stage buyer's journey content, and so the buyer's journey is best done when you provide the right information at the right time and in the right way. And so when we go through and think about social media, it's usually earlier stages of the buyer's journey. People are just getting started. They're trying to discover not just vendors, but what it is that they should be thinking about or what they should know. And we hear, and I hosted a panel in the fall last year, the state of the industry with Anya on it. And in there, we talked about how important it was to educate clients. And when I asked, well, what exactly does that mean? And how do you do that? There wasn't a lot of consistency in the responses from the panelists. They all knew that education was important, but how to do that, not as consistent. And so I've spent the last 6 months really coming up with how to articulate that. And I gave a talk at Engage, a breakout session in December about it for the 4 different milestones of social media, website, discovery, call, and proposal. But for the short version of an answer to your question is that on social media, we've really got to focus on providing expertise and authority in areas that are of importance to our clients. And so we need to take the buyer desires for our ideal client and come up with 5 or 6 of them and really make those the content that we are addressing in our post. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're a photographer and you want to charge more for your services. You know that your number one client concern or desire, but your concern is that they feel awkward in front of the camera. So what does that mean? That means that you have to tell them that you can help them feel comfortable in front of the camera. So your content on social media should be geared towards how you make people comfortable in front of the camera. And you would come up with a list of like, how do I make people feel comfortable in front of the camera? And you should list out 5, 6, 7 things. Engagement sessions. We do a meet and greet in real life or a Zoom call, or I provide gentle posing direction, whatever it is. And then becomes what you post about on social media, a photo of you going out and doing a meet and greet, or a photo of you talking about why you love engagement sessions, or even better, why your couples love engagement sessions. They make me feel comfortable in front of the camera, blah, blah, blah. So that's the kind of content strategy that I would look at putting out. What I would not do is I would not put out, here's why stuff costs so much. Like
Yeah.
that, like, look at all this, look at all the work that I have to do, and that justifies why I should charge. Or like, I just crossed my 20th year of business, and therefore I should charge $10,000 more than the first time I started. Like, that lands on deaf ears. What we want to do is we want to put out messaging that is going to address the buyer desires and how you help them. That's the focus.
Well done, my friend.
Are we at
That's
time? Oh yeah.
amazing. I mean,
We got a few
look
times for
at
Q&A.
you. We have a few questions
Yeah.
and a few minutes. I think we could
Yes.
speed round this.
Let's
Uh,
do it.
but I'm so proud of you. That was so great.
Oh,
Okay.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been fun. We're gonna need a part 2. I know it.
Okay.
We're gonna need to do that. Okay, so let's see. We've got some questions. What questions do you recommend using to determine the buyer type?
The first thing I do is I go on to LinkedIn. That's what I really want. I just want to go on LinkedIn. Typically we can identify through a person's interests and activities and profession or jobs that they've had, what they tend to gravitate towards. We can then go in with a hypothesis. And then we can kind of pick up on clues that are inside of the inquiry, and certainly within the first few minutes of talking to them on a discovery call. Like, just the fact, Katie, that I know that you're in charge of community at Rock Paper Coin. I'm guessing that you got a lot of relator in you, because you're all about group harmony, making everybody feel included and heard and understood, right? Like, it's all about empathy and understanding, and you want to make sure that everybody feels the support and step-by-step guidance. And look at how you started the presentation: empathy, 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 right? Like, so like, I just knowing that you were in charge of community for Rock Paper Coin, I would say that you're a relator with maybe a little bit of dreamer in you. So it just you kind of get used to screening, just like a detective would. You pick up on the clues, you have pattern recognition after a while, and you end up getting pretty good at it.
You have palm reader on your resume, right? Clearly, you read my palm. Guilty as charged. Yes, that is my email signature. I love that. Okay. What are your first items you look at for a brand to create demand when their bookings are low?
Bookings are low. Well, there's different stages that I would focus on. one is getting more eyeballs on the website.
Mm.
Number two is getting more people who are on the website to inquire. Number three, getting more people who are inquiring to convert and sign a contract. So I would look to see a short, middle, and long-term strategy. So short term is going to be, how can I take advantage of the people who are coming in? So that would be getting people further along in the buyer's journey. The midterm would be website and content strategy. So what can I change on my website? The quick fixes, things like the hero image, making the navigation simpler, removing too much information about pricing, making the contact form simpler and easier. Lots of different things can make improvements. I had a person who literally reached out to me after one of the free workshops we did a couple weeks ago, and she's like, "Sam, I'd love to join your mastermind, but I'm not getting enough inquiries. How do I get more inquiries?" And this was a DM that she left me on Instagram, and I went through and I just clicked on the website because this is typically the problem. I went in, I looked. She had something like 14 different contact fields to fill out. And I was like, just remove these 8 and let me know what happens. Literally the next day, she emailed me or DM'd me and said, I got 3 inquiries and have 2 discovery calls just since yesterday changing my contact form. So I would say start with some of those things. And then long term, you're going to need to do things like building out SEO, doing blog strategy with Pinterest, and then trying to grow your audience with your social media and expanding your professional network. So, these things you can change today. These things you can change within, 1 week to 1 month. And these things take 12 to 36 months to really start bearing, well, 6 to 36 months to start bearing fruit.
Yeah, yeah. And we actually, while you were talking about that, I think your question kind of skimmed on that, but we got one last question here
Yeah.
that came in the chat. But it says, ever since I raised my pricing to be more competitive in the market, I had more inquiries than I could handle. My conversion rate has tanked. I'm still getting lots of inquiries, but the amount that actual booked has gone away down, which is okay. Just curious what your thoughts are on that, converting more leads to clients.
Yeah. So,
It's very similar, but maybe a little different than what you're
yeah,
doing.
but I'll get some specific benchmarks, at least that I have seen with my own clients, and this is not as scientific as it could be one day, but I got a pretty good pulse on a lot of different businesses that are at different places as far as pricing goes in their market. What I have found is that somewhere, like for a mid-market vendor, you with mid-market pricing, you might find something in like the 15 to 20% conversion rate would be a good number. Like I'd be happy with that if I saw that right now. It used to be 20 to 25%. Now it's 15 to 20%. If you are in the premium or entry level luxury, so working with weddings that are $100,000, $125,000, maybe $150,000, somewhere in that neighborhood, you might like have a 10 to 15%, maybe 10% conversion rate. So you're going to get 1 out of 10 bookings instead of 2 out of 10 bookings or 3 out of 20 bookings. If you move up from that level to the next level where you're working with 150 to 300,000, could be 7 to 10% or 5 to 10% conversion rate. And my clients who are in ultra luxury, they're working with budgets that have $500,000 or more. We're talking about 2 to 5% conversion rates. So what I would recommend doing, whoever answered the question, whatever field you're in, is go through and look at the budgets of the weddings that you're working with, and then just use those benchmarks as a number. What you mentioned of like, as I raise my prices, my conversion rates have gone down. Absolutely, 100%. That's going to be a trend. We just don't want it to go too far down. What I will say again with the short term, midterm, long term is if you want to increase your prices, you have to start planting seeds to increase demand on your business because you will need more throughput in your sales pipeline to get to the number of bookings that you're interested in. So I recommend starting with the number of bookings that you want per year and then multiplying it by those benchmarks or dividing it by those benchmarks that I shared. So if you want to book 20 weddings and you're charging, mid-market, you might have to get, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 inquiries. If you are charging premium prices at, say, luxury price points and you want to do 20 weddings, you might need to get 200 to 300 inquiries. And so if you increase your price, you have to immediately start increasing demand on your inquiry form and getting people to start the conversation with you because you're just not going to convert. I won't convert, and I'm a pretty good salesperson. I'm going to see my conversion rate go down as the prices go up.
Yeah, yeah. Ugh, Sam, thank you so much for
Welcome.
sharing your expertise today. It was such A pleasure spending time with you this afternoon, my friend. And as a reminder, this is a monthly webinar hosted by us, Rock, Paper, Coin. So don't miss out on our next Money Talks in April, which is all about how to build generational wealth as an entrepreneur. We know money mindsets are inherited, but they can be rewritten. So if you didn't grow up with an educational foundation in finance, navigating entrepreneurship, wealth building, and long-term financial security in general can feel like you're stepping into uncharted territory. But there is good news. You can break the cycle, and we are going to show you exactly how to do that. So be sure to look out for that sign up. It's going to be truly transformative conversation. And again, thank you, Sam. I can't wait for part 2. And thank you all for joining us. I hope you guys have a great day.